I remember belonging to prayer groups for girls who were praying for a husband. And there was a girl in the group there were two married women and the rest of us were single. And we were all so desperate to get married. We were all dating some guy who didn't want us, who wasn't choosing us. And we were all hoping that we could pray our way through into his heart, because he was the one we'd given our hearts to, and we still had time to have babies, and there's all this time and we wanted it to work. And so there was a woman in the group who had gotten married, and she said, girls, I fasted and prayed. I fasted and prayed. I fasted for 21 days. And finally, what happened was, after fasting and praying, I decided to take a holiday to the Caribbean on my own. And, when I got back, he asked when I would be back into the country. And he met me at the airport with an engagement ring. And that's how I'm married. And then they eloped and got married. And it was such a beautiful story. It was so dreamy. The guy who didn't want her, the guy who was playing games, showing up at the airport with a ring. Just, isn't that every girl's dream? That guy that you're obsessed with who's ghosting you, who's pulling away, imagining that guy that you really like just showing up. It was like a fairy tale. We all sat there and we lapped it up, and she was happily married to this guy, and he was gorgeous and younger than her and just amazing, and she was glowing and she was so happy. So what did we think? We thought, right, we're gonna fast and pray too, and we're gonna fast a lot and pray a lot, and the useless relationships we're in, the situationships we're in, we're going to turn around and become relationships. Yay. And so here we are sitting around, and we plan to fast and pray. And so we do that. We fast and pray and fast and pray and fast and pray. And at the end of that year, after we had really spent some time praying together, praying sometimes all-nighters, prayer chains, we used everything we understood about prayer at that time. We were praying in chains. We were praying every hour through the night in turns. We were committed to making sure that these little situationships that we were in were going to turn into husbands and marriages, and we would be able to say goodbye to the whole dating world. At the end of the year, nothing had really changed. Things were just as they were. We were stagnant, and so we decided, right, we need to really make up our minds if we're going to take this much effort, investment, and spiritual energy into the next year, or whether we should just cut our losses and hear what God has to say. So the day before Christmas, we all got together and we wrote the names of these men that we were like besotted by, and we lit a fire and we put their names in the fire, and all of us made a vow to God, to each other, that if this man turned around and chose us, then fine, but he had until Christmas Day to make his interest known, and if he didn't choose us, we would walk away without looking back. And so we all put in our, I think it was 4 of us who'd been left after the madness. We all threw our papers in the fire, and we went on with our lives, because there was a part in each and every one of us that has completely surrendered the whole thing. Because girls, we know how stressful it is to love a man who's not loving you back. And no matter what you try, no matter what you say, no matter what you do, he's just not choosing you. And so on Christmas Day, 1 out of the 3 of us got a proposal. We were not saying, it was just random. 1 of us got a proposal and is married till today. And why do I share this story? Because I want to share it for the girls who are like, why does God choose some people and not others? What happened in those dynamics? What was really going on? Why did the girl with the 21-day fast end up with a fairy tale? Only 1 out of the 4 girls end up with a fairy tale. How come the other 3 didn't? How come the other 3 left empty-handed? Why didn't God answer the prayer of the other 3? And perhaps, why didn't God answer your prayer? Why have you been fasting and praying? You're probably in a group of women that have been fasting and praying. You've probably sown seed. You've probably traveled halfway across the world to a special pastor. You've done all kinds of things spiritually to change the game for yourself, but you are still stuck. No matter how hard you pray, no matter how much you fast, you're watching everybody else have their prayers answered, and you're wondering what is going on. At that time, I wasn't a relationship expert. This was about 15 years ago. And we were all just stumped. We all just had to take our little broken hearts and move forward and be excited for the one friend that was getting married and not quite understand. I think we just accepted that not understanding was enough. So what I want to do in this video, for those of you who really want to know what that was about, and how that can affect your life, no matter where you are, whether you're a Christian or spiritual or Muslim, whatever your religion or your spirituality. I hope that you will gain something from this, because one of the things that we're taught in religion, especially, is that God will override our lack of wisdom. But the Bible tells us that a wise woman builds a house, but with her own hands tears it down. That relationships are built on the principle of wisdom. You cannot build a relationship on anything other than the principle of wisdom. And sometimes we have God infuses his wisdom in all of it, and we ultimately come out with the right and correct result. And so let's start with the girl who did a 21-day fast and ended up having this fairy tale relationship. Here's what happened. She had a relationship dynamic that was built on something foundational. They both went to the same church. They had built strong emotional bonds. And she had made her desires known to him. She had set a standard for him that he knew the only way to access her again is if he proposes to marry her. And she had behaved in such a way that she had been high value without even her knowing that she was being high value. She had behaved in such a way where she was not clingy and needy. At this point, she decides, right, I'm ready to get married. He's not ready to get married. And what does she do? She activates distance. She goes away on holiday. She first begins a fast. What does a fast do? A fast takes our attention from everything in the world. A fast takes our attention away from every fleshly distraction and narrows it to God, because when we get hungry and we're realizing why we're not having breakfast, we are aware of God. We come home to God. We reconnect with God. She had created energetic distance. She took her energy away from him, out of his orbit, and into her own and to God. And that taking out of our energy from a man's orbit will always make a man sense the change and pursue. This is something that I've been teaching for a very, very long time. This is something that is true, that any teacher worth their weight in gold would have taught you. Distance and space will always create higher attraction. And it's not just physical distance, it is energetic distance. What she thought she was doing was going to God and making this big sacrifice so he could grant her, like a fairy godfather, a husband that she always wanted. But what she actually did by fasting was activating a principle, a wisdom relationship principle, and she was completely oblivious to it. And so were we. That's why we couldn't explain it. Once she took her energy away from the man, as all of us need to be doing in a relationship, that's why this video is called Ask for Nothing and Get Everything. The only way to actually get the love that you crave and deserve is to not need it anymore. The only way to get the man that you cannot live without, that is got you staying up at night, is to not need him in your life anymore. Is to be so neutral in your energy about this man that he has no choice but to come back. And so she activated this principle by first taking energy away from a man and onto God. And this is why we fast. We don't fast for God to wave his magic wand and make things better, even though he does. But we fast that we can be more aligned to God. And wherever God is, wherever we are aligned with God, is perfection, is harmony, is peace, is unity. It is where miracles happen. Fasting brings us out of the distractions of this world and draws us into alignment with the will of God, the presence of God, the power of God. And when we are there, things align. Okay, so when we fast and we take our energy back from TV, from business, from work, from food, from all the social activities, we are calling ourselves back to the place of power. And that's what she did. And then she took a holiday away. She created physical distance, all of which, unbeknown to her and unconscious to her, was creating distance between this man and her. The distance he needed to be able to think about if he wanted something long term. She gave him distance so he could think. She gave him distance and space so he could figure out how valuable she was by her absence. She didn't go chasing after him. She, unbeknown to herself, wanting to heal herself, wanting to regulate herself, wanting to be closer to God so she could get this man, inadvertently activated the principles of wisdom. And this is how God works. When we distance ourselves psychologically from a person, they can actually make up their minds. That distance, that going away she did, gave him even more space because they were at the same church. So he got a month or a few weeks or a few days to not see her, to miss her, to think about her. And that is why her big romance happened. Not because God favorited her prayer and fasting and gave her the miracle that we were all trying to get, right? I hope that this really helps you understand the things that I teach you will save you doing unnecessary, desperate things, because the principles that you learn here at the Black Swan Relationship Academy are biblical, spiritual principles for relationships. They're wisdom principles. So what happened with the friend who got married and the three of us let go of these gentlemen? The girlfriend who got married, she had already built and established a relationship with this man. They were living together. They had been living together for 2-3 years. It had been a bit shaky. She wasn't very happy. And interestingly enough, of the three of us, she was the only one who was adamant. She said to us at that time, "I do not care what happens. I am leaving on the 1st of January. I've had enough. If he's the one, he's not the one. I don't care. I'm putting his name in the fire because I am done with him. I am packing my bags on the 1st of January and I am out." Now, she activated a spiritual principle and spiritual wisdom around relationships. The Bible says, unless a seed falls to the ground and dies, it can bear no fruit. You see, what she did, she activated the death to life principle, whereas the other one created the distance and space principle. The reason the death to life principle was necessary for this situation is because it had been built on faulty foundations. This situation had been built on strong foundations, but because she did not understand the dynamics, had been needy, wantingly, and all the things, by creating distance and space, he was able to build something on the foundations they had built. On this instance, she had moved in, no ring, no promises, no nothing. She had compromised her faith with God and her values in her Christian faith, and she had all the wrong foundations. And I know somebody's watching this and thinking, that's me, I have all the wrong foundations. When the foundations of the heart are destroyed, what can the righteous do? That is a scripture in the word. So at this point, the righteous has to let go. The righteous has to divorce themselves from and leave clean. And some of us are in this situation. It's not about fasting. It's not about prayer. It's about fasting and prayer so you can come into divine alignment. These two women came into divine alignment in such a way that one had to sacrifice the relationship in their heart completely. And so this friend had sacrificed the relationship in her heart. She had run the course. The fasting and prayer had brought her to the place where she was determined for it to die. And just like Abraham takes Isaac up the mountain and realizes that God already had a sacrifice, what she didn't know was that God had only been working her to a point of repentance, a point where she was ready to let go of something that was not built on the right foundations. So she activated the death to life. When I speak to women and they are living in situations where they're waiting for a ring with this man, giving wife privileges, they're hoping there's a little script that I can give them that is going to change the story, or a little way to behave that can change the story. But what actually changes the story when you are in a long-term relationship with a man who's not put the ring is to destroy the relationship, kill the relationship, because that relationship has been built on faulty foundations. And because the foundations are destroyed, there is nothing you can build on it that are worth building. Even if you ham or whore, scream and shout, and that man marries you, you will only divorce him because he did not desire to marry you from the depth of his heart. So how do I explain the other three? So these two women got to a point where they were asking for nothing. They got to a point where they were neutral. And so they got everything. They didn't get a boyfriend. They didn't get, they got a husband. They got a husband because they allowed themselves to get to the point called zero. What happened to the other three of us? The other three of us got to the point called frustration, got to the point called overwhelm, got to the point where we felt undone, but we did not surrender. We did not come to the place where we were truly able to walk away. And so to come into divine alignment, we had to operate in the principle of surrender. These other two ladies, one had completely destroyed the relationship in their heart and ended it and walked away. One had created the kind of distance and space that created a surrender moment for her, where she was really coming to terms with the fact that this may never happen. Both had died to those relationships. But the three of us were still hopeful for that miracle. We were just tired. But I also want to say that even though we were just tired of the nonsense and all the things that we were having to endure, God, in his merciful form, answered those prayers, just not in the way that we desired. You see, when we cannot shut the door, when we emotionally feel we cannot shut the door on a relationship, a situationship, a connection with a man, and we fast and pray and draw ourselves back to God and come into alignment with our spirituality, God will always show us mercy. And mercy doesn't always look pretty. Mercy doesn't always look like you get everything you've ever wanted and dreamt. Mercy sometimes looks like God shutting the door that you would not. And for the three of us looking back, those three gentlemen were untenable. They were not healthy options for girls like us. They were not worth investing our time and our energy. Those men would have become our demise. The three of us went on to achieve great things in our careers. We went on to do amazing things, and these men would have been a distraction. They would have been a block into our lives. We would have not ever met purpose. The three of us went off to do great things. The other two went off to great marriages. So God in his infinite wisdom called mercy. And this is why when you come to coach here at the Black Swan Relationship Academy, I never tell women, oh, leave that relationship, no matter how bad it is. Because we have to take a journey with you that will help you take the journey to the place where mercy will speak for you. And sometimes winning is losing the relationship that you are hoping would work, even after you have fasted and prayed and gone to that pastor and sowed seed and jumped to the left and jumped to the right. But I also want to say something before I end this video. When we're going online and we're hearing people's testimonies, I sowed seed and the next day I met my husband, I fasted and prayed and the next day I met my husband, please understand that there are many dynamics that they are ignorant of that were in motion that God worked with. What I want you to know is that the miracle of your relationship is based on the depth and the degree of your wisdom. I want to invite you to grow your wisdom, your understanding, and your knowledge of relationship with us here at the Black Swan Relationship Academy, so that you can not only identify the dynamics that are not in motion, understand whether you should be there, and activate spiritual principle on purpose without doing crazy things. Spirituality is a powerful thing, but if it is not grounded in wisdom, in all you're getting, get understanding. If it is not grounded in wisdom, knowledge, and understanding, you will wear yourself out, damage and bruise your relationship with God or whoever your deity is, thinking that you are unchosen, thinking that you are unfavored, when really you just lack wisdom, knowledge, and understanding. I hope to see you soon on my next video, and I invite you to check the link in the description below so that we can invite you to a complimentary call and help you map out your love life for the next 6 months. And also perhaps join the House of Swans. It's a free group. All you have to do is follow the links in the bio, and let us begin to change your love story in 2026. I look forward to seeing you on my next video. In the meantime, do take care of you. Love you lots. Bye.